welcome and welcome back to the United Mates Football Podcast. At the time of recording, Bayern have just played Mainz in the Bundesliga, and joining me to go through all of the action is somebody who's been on the guest on our pod before. He's a Bayern fan and one of the hosts of the Super Bayern Podcast, amongst wearing several other hats as far as being a creative person in the world of football. It's Tim Richards. Tim, welcome back to the pod. Happy New Year. How are you doing?
Happy New Year. Thank you for having me. I'm doing all right. Thank you. New Year, same me, same Bayern, and same podcast. So some of those things are better than the others. I'm delighted to be back.
Yeah. No, it's great to have you back. This New Year's been quite a mixed start for me. Personally, I twisted my ankle not playing football, but after I successfully had a nice kickabout, I twisted it walking home from playing football.
Oh.
So a bit of
that's very unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that.
Quick letdown. Hopefully it's uphill from here. Just like the remnants of 2020, I can't quite shake them yet. But Anyway, onwards and upwards. I guess maybe I'll bust out a better icebreaker, because I was looking at your Twitter, as we like to do when we have guests. And last time we asked you about the mints, but something else that I noticed was a GIF that you had associated with one of your tweets, and it's of Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys, the popular Canadian show, and he's like kind of blinking away through his quite thickly rimmed glasses. So on that note of I guess Four Eyes from TV, who's your favorite Four Eyes character from either TV or movie besides Bubbles, I guess, or just like comics or anything else?
I'll say George Costanza. I know that we actually mentioned Seinfeld the last time I was here. I'm a massive Seinfeld fan, and so I'm a big fan of George Costanza, Jason Alexander. I've never actually seen Trailer Park Boys. I've heard great things. I saw that GIF apropos of nothing, like a good couple of years ago. I thought it was hilarious. I was like, this guy's glasses are so thick. This is amazing. And so it's like a very vivid thing. I think that's probably my answer. Is that the right answer?
I was just about to praise your answer, because it was above and beyond anything that I could come up with. I was sort of like drawn to more cartoon things like Milhouse from The Simpsons, or even, is it from, I don't know if it would ever have been like televised or turned into a film, but is it Waldo or Wally? Depending on where you are in the world, I think he has a different name.
It's Wally over here. Yeah.
Okay, I think in America it's Waldo, perhaps. But yeah, and in fact, I guess that now that I look behind me at the Arsenal scarf, that kind of like reminds me of Wally or Waldo. It's
very reminiscent.
Closet Arsenal fan, apparently. Well, moving on to the game that we were mentioning earlier, and Bayern, I think heading into today, we're second place, maybe like had a game in hand on Leipzig, I believe. Otherwise, Mainz were second bottom. So just before we dive into the action on the field, what were your impressions of the Bayern team sheet heading in, and sort of your expectations going into the game?
It's kind of this was the back line. This was more or less the back line, with the exception of Pavard. We had Kimmich right back. This was the back line that played the last few games of the Champions League season. So on paper, you think this is a championship winning side. No, that's sadly not how things are done at Bayern. There's like a clear problem with Bayern's defense, and that was evident in the Champions League last season as well. There was just something about these players that it seemed like we got away with quite a lot. Like the fact that we were going up against like Neymar, Di Maria, and Mbappe with quite a slow and not strictly mobile Jerome Boateng. David Alaba, who is not really a centre-back, but will be commanding fees as if he is like a world-class centre-back wherever he goes. The fact that we managed to get away with it was like a huge relief, but it seems to have really caught up with us now. So this game was, I believe, the 8th game in a row that we've conceded first. And like kind of early on, like we managed to get past the 20-minute mark. I think they scored after about like 30 minutes maybe. But when I saw the team sheet, it's something that on paper looks like it should be perfect. But like if you've seen Bayern even just a little bit over the past few weeks, or like back when they were playing at the end of last season, you kind of knew what was going to happen. It's like frustratingly predictable at times.
Sure.
But it's, sadly we got away with it again. But I imagine that's something that we'll touch on. But like the attack is good, and like the defense is the thing that stands out. But like we had both Sané and Gnabry starting, and neither of them have been in great form. You can tell that they're kind of missing like just a little bit of confidence, or like they're in two minds about whether to shoot or to pass. But otherwise, like this was, I think any Bayern fan would look at this and think, I've got a rough idea of what's going to happen here.
Well, speaking about what happened, I guess, there was an early scare, I believe, from the eventual scorer of the first goal. I'm going to try not to butcher his name, Burkardt, who impressed me, especially in the first half, when Mainz were more impressive in the game. But Neuer made the save, and the game kind of turned into a bit of attack versus defense. That was sort of how the first half went. And to be honest with you, in the first half, Mainz were the better attacking and defending side. And so it played out how it played out. The first goal, you spoke about sort of like the predictable nature of Bayern's back line and the limitations of Boateng. It arguably was a foul from Burkardt in the build-up. Having said that, it was about as Sunday league of as a goal as you could concede, just literal long ball over the top, guy runs in behind and scores. Moving on and assuming that, the correct decision was made and that it wasn't a foul. Boateng, where's he at? Because that's not really a Champions League winning defender or, World Cup winning defender performer.
Yeah, exactly. I think I always have to compare what's going on now with what was happening a few months ago during the Champions League, during that, like the Portugal tournament where everybody went to, COVID hotspot Portugal, because that's the safe thing to do. It's ridiculous, but that's neither here nor there. Basically, Hansi Flick kept the same team for like the last few games. He switched out Perisic for Coman in the final, but for the most part he had a system that worked and didn't really deviate away from it, and that was kind of the case throughout most of the Bundesliga as well. Once Bayern had like won the Bundesliga, it became a matter of, okay, we can tinker here, like we can play this young guy, we can play this guy here, and we can give people a rest ahead of the later games. With Boateng in particular, he is clearly not reliable enough to play like week in, week out. But when you see him, it's such a confusing thing to discuss, because he's both fairly reliable when you don't really expect him to be. But then when he starts to become reliable, you're like, oh, this is great. He'll be all over the place and will make really bad challenges, or like he'll kind of like throw himself about a little bit. Like he's a very acrobatic kind of guy, not necessarily in the same way that, JJ Okocha was acrobatic or Nani was acrobatic. More, he falls in like a very unacrobatic and graceful way.
Sometimes at the Nou Camp.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, that is one of them. But then there's also like other cases where he was doing it, like in the Euros. He was kind of like, I think it was the handball against Italy. He just kind of like threw himself. It was almost like the movie poster for Brazil, the Terry Gilliam one, with like the bird with the wings. That's kind of how it seemed.
Okay.
I did a film degree. It's not often that I get to use any form of knowledge that's relevant, so I'm going to try my hardest to get it in.
I'm going to Google it.
Yeah, it's. I think it's just a bird with wings. I don't know. I don't even know if I've seen that film. Doesn't matter. Basically, Boateng is somebody that was told at the start of last season, maybe it's a good idea if you found a new team, like fairly point blank. I think even Uli Hoeneß, when he was still the president, he said, yeah, Boateng, it is time for him to find a new team. And he was putting in extra training because he's remarkably injury prone. There was a time where he would really only get to play about like 70 minutes and then would come off. But there was something about Uli Hoeneß saying it's time for you to find a new team that kind of like switched something in his head, where he's decided, I'm going to work hard. And he did. And it's great to see somebody that has been such a great servant for the club be so reliable for like that Portugal tournament in the Champions League. But it is becoming really apparent this can't go on forever. Like, he is sadly at the very end of his career with Bayern. I think he's still got like a move in him somewhere, probably Italy, because that's the thing that people do.
Yeah, or maybe the MLS if he's really kind of deciding to cash in earlier.
Yeah, well, because so he's part of is it Rock Nation Sport or Rock Sport, is whatever Jay-Z's like sports agency is. That he was like one of the first. I think he was the first footballer to sign with them. So it kind of makes sense for him to go stateside. But this will almost definitely be his last season, because it isn't just this game; it's this game and like lots of highlights from like other games around it as well.
Yeah, he's been faltering in more recent times, as you've mentioned. But I guess on general Bayern faltering within this game, the second goal came from a free kick, which kind of wasn't necessarily how the first half was playing out. It was a bit of more, like I was saying, attack versus defense, counter-attacking. So this was a different goal to concede. And again, sort of not the best marking. I don't know who in particular lost their man, but it's I'm going to get the name.
It was like it was a combination of like Pavard, Boateng, and Muller. I think they lost Alexander Hack.
Yeah,
and it was a great header. That's like the really frustrating thing about, like, if I was a Mainz fan, Mainz didn't deserve to lose 5-2. Much in the same way that Bayern maybe didn't deserve to win 5-2. They scored really great goals. They had some amazing chances. And when they were given an opportunity, they really took it. So their second goal was really well worked. It was a great set piece, and it worked out well for them.
Yeah, I guess the story of the first half that came pretty much at the end. You were talking about players like Gnabry and Sané sort of maybe being caught in two minds, and that being something that didn't help Bayern in the first half. But in general, the attack was quite patchy. I'd say maybe weren't getting players close enough to Lewandowski to have like flick-ons and 1-2s and players running off of each other. But just in general, Mainz were quite structured and attacked and defended as a team, and Bayern seemed to have a bit of a difficult time sort of getting communication across or whatnot, and being able to defend and attack as a team. What do you think? Well, obviously there were two changes made at halftime, but besides that, do you think it was, did those players really come on, Süle and Goretzka, and like leave such an imprint on the game, or did Flick have words at halftime, or both?
I think it's certainly both. I don't. So Süle is another person that's been kind of like off form. So he had quite a bad injury, like about a quarter of the way into last season, and then has come back, and he's not really looked the same. So he's had like. He's been overweight, or he's been just not quite the same sort of like durable guy that he very quickly became known for. I think it's more to do with the fact that Joshua Kimmich was moved into a position where he was able to like really impact the way that Bayern were playing. And so this is a conversation that's been going on amongst Bayern fans for pretty much as long as he's been like a starting player for us. Is he better as a midfielder, or is he better as a right back? And sadly, the answer is yes. He's just really good. And he's too good in midfield to not have him there. But when he's playing as a right back, the difference, I think that was probably like the fundamental difference between how Bayern were in the first half and how they were in the second half. Because the way that Bayern attack on the wings is it's kind of asymmetric. So Alphonso Davies can push up, and Pavard, who I think he is like naturally a central defender, can stay further back, and everything just kind of like shifts over slightly. But what I said to my friends in the chat from the other podcast, my other favorite podcast, I think having Kimmich as a right back is going to be the thing that really opens up Sané to be like this really commanding attacker. And that happened. Like, he was able to score a goal. I'm fairly certain Kimmich got the assist for that. Okay, it was like very much a solo effort of Sané kind of like taking the ball away, doing like a very exaggerated Iron Robin impression, which as a Bayern fan, more than happy to see that. But I think the difference wasn't so much who was brought on, but rather who was brought off and who took over. I think having Süle in as Boateng's replacement was fantastic. And I think I would speak for a lot of other Bayern fans when I say we need to see Süle every single week in the starting lineup alongside Hernandez, because I don't think Alaba was brilliant. I think he had a couple of moments, but I think considering he's like asking for a salary of like 20 million euros a year, he needs to not have like a few moments. He needs to be the best, and he wasn't. But I would, if I was in charge, frustratingly, I am not. I would be putting Kimmich at right back for the foreseeable future, because I think he offers far too much. I don't know. Every time I think about it, I'm like, yeah, but when he's in midfield, that's the thing that works best. It's a really difficult discussion to like come to an answer to, and I don't think anybody has the right solution.
It's a good problem to have, I suppose. And in terms of today's game, he really was within the 45 minutes of the second half an absolute revelation at right back. He got up and down in a way that Pavard didn't in the first half. And to an extent, maybe the game wasn't suited for his creative endeavors in the midfield. He was always going to have more opportunity on the right, given that Sané in front of him likes to come inside. Kimmich found some nice little space on the right-hand side to whip in some crosses. And you mentioned him getting what must have been, probably like a quite basic assist for the Sané goal. He would have had another assist just before that. Sané missed, I think, quite an easy chance from inside the 6-yard box when Kimmich put it on a plate for him. And even getting back to Bayern's first goal, it's a Kimmich goal that he starts from the right, crosses, and then it ends up back at him. And he finishes it off. He really was probably the star guy and maybe the catalyst in beginning to turn the game around. But on that note, I believe after Kimmich makes it 2-1, or even before that, perhaps, Latza misses a chance and hits the post, which would have made it 3-0. And that might have been game over. Although, given what ended up happening, it probably would have been quite an exciting game had they been able to make it 3-0. But like I said, that doesn't go in. That's kind of the turning point. And then Kimmich makes it 2-1, and then Sané makes it 2-2. Once it's at 2-2, you're only going to, be backing one team to win it. And Bayern did then take care of the business quite handsomely. How can Flick ensure that he gets 90 minutes of second half from Today Football from Bayern throughout the rest of the season? Is it realizing that maybe he does have to move on from tying himself down to players like Boateng, or is it a mentality? Why are Bayern such slow starters?
I think this isn't even a problem from this season. I don't think it's a problem with Flick. This is something that's been happening for a really long time. This has been going on for a few seasons now. So I can remember in Jupp Heynckes' last season, there was just this period of time where Bayern would concede within the first 5, 10, 15 minutes or so, which is quite a broad range. But if you're conceding first so early on, there's clearly a problem, because teams just seem to notice, if we run at these guys, we might have a chance. So Niko Kovac, who I adored, maybe wrongly, maybe not, when he was the manager at Frankfurt, that was his game plan against Bayern in the cup final. He said their defense is slow, run at them, and it worked perfectly. It was simple, and Kovac was kind of vilified for not having any tactics, but it was simple enough to work. And you had Ante Rebic running at Mats Hummels, and it worked effortlessly. It worked so well. So this isn't a new thing. This has been a problem with Bayern for a long time. In my eyes, I think it is a mentality thing. I think teams can see that Bayern are beatable. You can score against them. And if you score against them early, you have the option to, okay, let's just get more. We can get 1, we can get 2, we can get, they could have actually got 5 today, Mainz. They did a fantastic job. But if you can get one, you just put everybody back. And Bayern, this is like a thought that I've been having quite a lot, is seeing how Bayern want to play and how they play best. So Bayern want to play like, prime Barcelona, lots of intricate passing, like moving the ball like really methodically up the pitch, and then getting into like a really dangerous spot. And then when you have the opportunity to shoot, you instead pass it to another option, and then it falls flat. Bayern are best when they are attacking at pace, going very directly. And when you have guys that are as fast as Alphonso Davies, as fast as Sané, Kingsley Coman, even like Kimmich isn't slow, and Goretzka and Muller and Lewandowski, you've got these guys that can just run. To not utilize it seems wasteful in a way. And maybe it's lazy to say, okay, just sit back and then we'll counter every single team. But it's that discussion of, okay, do you want really entertaining football or do you want really successful football? And I think you can certainly have both. But I think there seems to be this complacency when Bayern start of, we're going to win this regardless. So let's just see what we can do. Let's just kind of like feel it out a bit. I think there's this thing about how Messi hasn't scored in like the first minute of a game or something like that. He scored in every minute except for the first one, because he spends the first like 10 minutes or so just kind of like walking around analyzing. And like, who am I to tell him that that's not the right way to do things? He is quite a bit better than I am. But that's kind of how I feel Bayern approach games. They want to like properly look at what they can do in the first 5 minutes. But when you have teams like an underdog like Mainz that have that mentality of, we might not win, but let's at least try. When you have teams that are just going to be running at your defense, if it is as shaky as it evidently is, that causes problems. So I think it is certainly an element of mentality, but at the same time, Flick is very dedicated to David Alaba and Jerome Boateng, for better or worse, mainly for worse.
It's interesting to hear that it's kind of, like you're saying, a combination of the tools that he has at his disposal, but then also this kind of quite privileged perspective of sort of being able to play with the handbrake on and know that you could probably pull it out if you need to, but maybe trying to, I don't know, approach it and achieve the most beautiful outcome if that's like the first choice. And then if it comes to it, it's like, all right, we'll just win it like the old Bayern way if we have to. It's quite interesting, even still, to hang on this. I think I noticed at halftime over the tannoy in the background of the stadium, they were playing Under Pressure, which I had to do a double take. And I was just like, is this for real? Because it's just so, like so literal to the point about, 2-0 down. Mm. Is that something that they tend to do at the Allianz Arena? Or because it don't think so. Into the storyline even more of just like they need the extra pressure to perform. I thought that was quite amusing. I didn't realize if it got somewhat lost in translation, but it ended up being like almost perfect.
I don't think they normally do that. Like I've not been there for, it's like getting on for a year now. Obviously I wasn't allowed to go, like can't travel, can't go to the games. When I've been in the stadium, I don't recall ever hearing Under Pressure before. Like not even like when Bayern have been like trailing at half time. They like to play Thunderstruck. I've heard Thunderstruck by AC/DC a few times, and that's always good fun.
Yeah. You think the German crowd might enjoy that? Yeah, no surprises.
Yeah.
I guess moving on from the equalizer to, well, it looked like he went 3-2 up through an own goal, which happened to get ruled out for a marginal offside in the build-up. And then directly after that, Gnabry, I think, has a chance saved. So it's kind of like the pressure's relentless. And it's, this third goal, you're knocking at the door, it's going to come. Eventually, it does come through Süle, actually, who I guess was brought on to shore up the defense. But also when you have somebody that big, he's always going to be an attacking threat from set pieces too. And he managed to bizarrely not score with his head or anything like that. He kind of brings it down and scores like a left foot half volley. So he did come on and have, a massive impact on the game, actually. From there, it's kind of the expected extra goals. Lewandowski gets in on the act, scores a penalty, scores again. Does this Bayern side, based off of kind of the quite, positive performance in the second half, when it is all working together harmoniously, have it within itself to outdo the Bayern of last year in some ways?
I think, as I said at the start, on paper it should. I think any other season, or like in any other circumstances, yes, like this team should be able to outperform what it did last year. I think our squad is better. It's slightly more balanced. We have depth where we need it. But I think the fact that there are so many games, it's like a game every 3 days. So there's a thing in German football called an Englische Woche, which is just an English week, which is where you play midweek and then you play at the weekend as well. And it's busy, and that's a quintessential English football trait. So it's very much it's hectic, and it's going on constantly, and you can really see that, like the Winterpause that the Bundesliga had, which is like the break between like just before Christmas and when it starts again in the new year. Normally that's like 3-4 weeks. It's a long time, and this was like a week and a half. But you can see just how significant that very short break was to a lot of the guys that needed it. So as I mentioned, people like Leroy Sané and Serge Gnabry, they needed a break to recover and refresh and think, okay, new year, new me. And it seemed to work out quite well, even though Gnabry didn't get a goal. I don't think he got an assist either. He looked better. Like he looked like it was going in the right direction.
You get fouled for the penalty?
Yes, and then he went off injured.
Default assist.
That counts. Yeah, exactly. That counts. That counts in my eyes. But yeah, no, he went off injured, which is a big shame, because you don't want somebody to come back looking really, really good and then instantly get injured again.
Is Coman injured too? I don't know if I saw him on the bench.
I think he was injured, but as like a precautionary thing. I think like he got a knock against Leverkusen, I believe. But he's been fantastic. Like I've never been overly fond of him, but I think the way that he's been playing recently has like really turned it around for not just myself, but for a lot of Bayern fans. We're all very proud of what our boy Kingsley's doing. But yeah, I think he's out for like a week maybe.
Well, you mentioned the depth, like, what is it, Musiala, as well as even Douglas Costa, who somehow found his way back to Bayern Munich, kind of knocking around in the wings if you were to get injuries in the space of this quite intense schedule during this season. So you'd expect Bayern to, I guess, have too much firepower at the end of the day. We're in, January currently. What is it? Leipzig, I think, have added Szoboszlai to their squad. Who knows if Dortmund are going to maybe strengthen. Those look like they might be the only two teams capable of even giving Bayern like a token, push for the title. Are Bayern planning to strengthen in January?
No, the January transfer window, I think for Bayern, but also like the general concept of it is really just if you absolutely need to. So I think Liverpool are likely to buy a centre back because they're missing Van Dijk and they don't really have the depth. So like if Fabinho gets injured for them, that's kind of it for them. Like they're going to start conceding a lot. So I think they're probably going to buy somebody, but Bayern don't necessarily need to, because he had a bad game today, but we have Boateng, we have Alaba, we have Süle, we have Hernandez, we have Pavard, we have I was about to say we have Bunassar. He's not been in the squad for a few games now, which is fine, because I think the defense is easily our weakest point by like a considerable margin. But I don't think it's in terms of we have depth, but I don't think it's anywhere near as strong as it is further up the pitch. But I can't see us buying anybody unless somebody gets very badly injured.
Well, looking further forward than even this season, perhaps, maybe let's look a few, further into the future, 2 or 3 years. The squad does have some aging players, the likes of Boateng, Thomas Müller, Lewandowski. There's, a few more, even probably someone like Manuel Neuer is, getting towards the end. When these guys are gone, you have these youngsters sort of waiting in the wings. Defensively speaking, there's Süle, there's Hernandez, Davies, all these young guys. Again, further up the pitch, you still have these youthful players, even someone like, I think, Xerxes up top as well coming through. At the end of the day, though, you can't necessarily expect all of these youngsters to live up to their potential. Things happen. Where do you see the next big investment in this Bayern squad being? I think probably Sané is the biggest name and biggest fee that you've kind of put out there in recent times. And that was obviously, you look at Robben and Ribéry over the past few years leaving, something that needed to be addressed. What's going to be the next star signing for Bayern?
I think it's becoming apparent that, so you mentioned Xerxes. I think of what we've seen, it's apparent that he isn't the guy that's going to take over. He can fill in, but you need somebody that can do more than just fill in. He seems to be quite lazy on the pitch, like he doesn't really press very well, which is something that Lewandowski's really only added to his arsenal in the past couple of seasons or so. So today you saw him like drop really, really deep to collect the ball and begin play. That's not something that you would have seen like a couple of years ago. He would have just stayed up top and then complained when somebody didn't pass to him. He's like really changed, which is great to see, because I wasn't a big fan of his for a while, but it's only in the last 2 seasons or so that I'm like, yeah, I'm glad that we have this guy. It's worked out quite nicely. And so we have, as you mentioned, like Neuer's getting older. I reckon Neuer will probably still be around for like the next 4 years. I think, considering how high his peak is, because he's still capable. So as you mentioned, they had when Mainz hit the post earlier, that was a save.
Yeah,
it hit Neuer's hand, and he got there. He has been responsible for Bayern keeping on, like holding on for as long as they can do. But I don't know how long he will be able to do that for. In my eyes, I would like to see him play for as long as Buffon. Well, I'd like to see him play for as long as humanly possible, but I'd like to see him go into his 40s, because I think he can do it. Yeah, he had his injury and like he had a bit of problems with his form. But if you see that Bayern are conceding goals, so few of them come from his problems or like mistakes that he's making. It's usually like really great efforts that no keeper could have saved. So I think, 2-3 years from now, Neuer will probably still be our number one. I at least certainly hope that's the case. I think the next big name that Bayern are likely to get would probably be somebody to take over from Boateng and Alaba in the form of Dayot Upamecano. So he's at Leipzig. I think he's in the coming up to the last year of his contract, or like maybe he has like 2 years left. But he seems to be like the archetypal defender that Bayern are going to need, because a lot of people would look at him and say, oh, he's the next Boateng. But I think that's incredibly lazy. Everything that I've seen of him, he looks way more like Mats Hummels on the ball. He's fantastic at bringing the ball forward. He's very calm on the ball. He's got great distribution. Like Boateng has great distribution as well. But there was like every couple of games or so when Mats Hummels had the ball, he would just dance through defenders. Like he'd go through the midfield. And I would look at it like, no, this isn't supposed to be happening. Like this doesn't make any sense. But like Upamecano has that sort of grace and ability. So that would solve like a number of problems in terms of both depth, but also the quality of depth as well. So I think our starting back line is going to be Davies, Hernandez, Süle, and then a right back. I don't know if that's Pavard or not. I'm not a big fan of Pavard, but he's only 24, 23, 24. He's still very young, so he has a long career ahead of him, potentially all with Bayern. But if you were to ask me who the next big name is, it would probably be Upamecano. If Havertz hadn't gone to Chelsea, it might have been him.
Well,
but I'm fine that didn't happen.
Yeah, on retrospect, huh? I guess from the neutral perspective, there's been the likes of Hummels, who, once upon a time won the league with Dortmund, and then Bayern took him, and that kind of was a double blow for Dortmund trying to mount a challenge. Likewise, you guys took Goetze, and now Leipzig, if anything, are kind of potentially emerging as this maybe alongside Dortmund, rival to Dortmund when it comes to challenging for the Bundesliga. And it might be a bit of a shame to see them lose Talismanic and young player as well, like Upamecano, to Bayern. But these things happen, and they've been happening. Lewandowski, obviously, another example of a player being taken from a rival side to kind of double strengthen Bayern. So it's like this attack and defense mechanism all in one. And it's no surprise that you guys have had dibs essentially on the Bundesliga for so long. Given essentially everything that I just mentioned, is there even a niggling fear within yours or the minds of any Bayern fans that this, I guess, generation almost of domination will not necessarily come to an end this season, but in the foreseeable future, do you see a time when Bayern doesn't win the league every season? It's just such a formality.
I think it has to happen eventually, because you only need to look as far as teams like AC Milan to see that you can be the biggest team in the world and then it can all come crashing down. I think a lot of that stems from financial difficulties and the way that Bayern is run. It's run as a business, but by people that understand the business of football. So that's unlikely to happen. We're unlikely to fall in financial hardships. In terms of we're not going to be able to attract star players anymore, I think there's going to be quite a big, it's something quite significant would have to happen for that to happen. Because I think you can see Manchester United, all it took was Alex Ferguson retired and left, and then all of a sudden everything kind of falls apart. I think Bayern not getting so attached to one guy. So I've said this a couple of times before, but it kind of disappointed me that Guardiola didn't stay for longer. And anytime I see anything about him signing an extension with Man City, it's always a little bit frustrating because I'm like, why didn't he want to go? Why didn't he want to go longer with us? But now I look back and I think that's the right thing to do, because as soon as you hold on to that, then once it's gone, you just lose any identity. And I'm sure as an Arsenal fan, you are able to empathize with that. You have, I don't know if you were Wenger in or Wenger out, but I know a lot of people that were Wenger out and are now thinking, oh, maybe he wasn't the only problem here.
I kind of sat on the fence conveniently, and but it still hasn't really helped either way. The consequences are what they are. Yeah, no, I can definitely empathize. So yeah. Well, Flick looks like he's not necessarily going anywhere or letting up in terms of his intensity and his expectations of the squad anytime soon. So we'll see. Although, do you think, I guess, one thing that might be tempting to Flick, given his history, and I think we spoke about it the last time we had you on as the assistant to Jogi Löw, is the Germany job, potentially. Although the manager currently, I don't know how long he's been in the job for, probably
too long.
15 years, maybe?
It was 2007, I think.
Okay, so 13 years. Again, like you said, far too long, especially considering how many times we've seen him pick his nose and all those other things on the sideline. The guy gets away. Yeah. But do you think that will appeal to Flick, and potentially maybe given the outcome of upcoming tournaments, if Germany don't perform, maybe Löw will lose his job and Flick will be the guy that the German FA wants to come for? Or is he saving that for, much later down the line?
I honestly have no idea. So he
you don't have a personal relationship with Hansi to give us a
No, I've been meaning to talk to him for a while, but sadly I don't speak German very well, so it's just not going to happen. I really have no idea. I saw something recently that the plan was for Jurgen Klopp to do his 7 years at Liverpool and then take over as Germany manager. I'd be more than okay with that. There's part of me that really, really wants to dislike Jurgen Klopp as somebody that is friends with Liverpool fans. But there's just this other part of me that thinks, oh, but he is a nice guy though. Like he's a very likable person.
He's nice when
It's
he
like
wins.
yeah, it's like anytime Mourinho isn't managing a team, you're like, oh, he's great. Like what a great guy this is. Um, so I would love to see that happen. I think like to kind of like go back to your previous question, Bayern are always very good at like planning long term. So like even when disaster struck and we had Niko Kovac and we were sat in 7th place, we were never. People were talking about it as if it was like the end of the world and we were facing relegation. We were so far away from like doom and gloom. Yeah, it wasn't great, but a lot has to go wrong for that to happen. So I think if Hansi Flick does want to leave after this season or next season or in like 6 years' time, somehow something will just fall into place, and maybe that is Jurgen Klopp will be free. Like there's an element of luck. There's an element of this was the plan all along. I think like should Hansi Flick go, and I think the next name down would probably be Jurgen Klopp. If he leaves, I think is it this season or the next season he's likely to leave Liverpool. I don't really know. If it's not him, then Julian Nagelsmann is a Bayern fan, so there's that working in his favor as well, and he's kind of shown enough to suggest, he can probably do this at a bigger club. I think his career trajectory is the right one, is probably what Niko Kovac should have done, because instead he went from like 1 to 9, whereas Nagelsmann was at like, okay, here's 1, let's go for a 5, let's just like build it up slightly more slowly. But I don't know, it's entirely up to him, and sadly I have no influence on his life. If I did, I probably would have told him to stop playing Jerome Boateng by now.
Right. Well, I guess on Klopp, it's a nice link to Mainz, who we haven't really, I guess, paid too much attention to compared to Bayern so far. He was obviously quite a famous player for them once upon a time, and another Liverpool and Mainz link would be a less kind of favorable one. Loris Karius, he shares the same history.
Of course, yes.
But let's dwell on Mainz for a moment. They were second bottom going into the game. Typically, to my knowledge, are kind of like a mid-table team in the Bundesliga, maybe like a low mid-table team. They have quite a young side with some prospects in it, like the goal scorer, the first goal was it Burkardt, and I think in defense they have a Dutch player, St. Just. The goalkeeper is a youngster. Even Boetius is, I think, in his prime now, but was a prospect once upon a time, I think, at Feyenoord. What do you make of them? Are they going down? They had a good first half and a terrible second half today. What's like the general shape up of the Bundesliga this season? Or who's going down? The title
Schalke.
looks like it's good. Tell me about Schalke, I guess.
I can say that with some certainty.
You think
Schalke
so?
is, I nothing. It would take an absolute miracle for them to even get to like the playoff position.
Is that bigger? That's bigger than like a Hamburg or a Stuttgart being relegated, right?
Kind of. I think because Hamburg had kind of like always flirted with the idea of relegation before eventually saying, yeah, we're done here. Let's go down. And Stuttgart, again, that was very much kind of like a gradual decline. For Schalke, they finished second a couple of years ago. Like they had a really good team. They had Goretzka, they had Max Meyer, and that doesn't necessarily count for much now.
Yeah, Crystal Palace fame.
Yeah, I think he's playing with their second team now, which is a huge shame, because like at one point him and Goretzka were they were fantastic for Germany's, it wasn't the Olympic team, I think it was like in the Confederations Cup. They were both doing fantastic things.
They even had Draxler as well.
Yeah, this is a team that's been able to produce guys like, well, they kind of like bring to the forefront guys like Manuel Neuer, Mesut Özil, Rakitic, like Huntelaar played for them,
Yeah, Raul.
like Leroy Sané. Raul, for some reason, was at Schalke.
Yeah,
It's like a great pub quiz question. Like, oh yeah, Raul was in the Bundesliga, but they've always been able to produce really talented guys, and as you mentioned, like Draxler is no exception to that. But there's just something about this season, and like 2020 as a whole, where just nothing went well for them. It was just free fall. So they had, but which is so strange considering they did so well only a couple of seasons ago, and they had Domenico Tedesco was their manager, and it didn't really work. Like they lost both Goretzka and Max Meyer, and so then I kind of have to think, okay, well how crucial were just those two guys? Like how crucial were these two, the two 11ths? But apparently they were. It's very sad. It's sad. It's kind of one of those things where you watch it happen and you're like, oh, you don't want to see it because it's just quite upsetting. But sadly, that is just the way that it will work. I hope that they come back like very, very quickly. Ideally, I hope that they can stay up because that would be a nice little fairy tale story. But it's not looking at all likely. As for Mainz, if they can play against other teams as intensely as they did against us in the first half, they'll climb up the table. So I can't remember how close the bottom of the table is. Schalke have got 4 points, Mainz have got 6, Bielefeld have got 10. So there is like a gap that's like still to make up, but it's not insurmountable. Like Bielefeld aren't a good team, so they're likely to drop points to anyone really. But I would, judging from today's performance, I would like to see Mainz stay up, or at least get to the playoff battle, because I think it's the way that they played, and as you mentioned, like they've got a lot of young guys. Their keeper, this was his Bundesliga debut, and conceding 5 goals. Okay, that sounds like one thing, but it's a completely different story. In his Bundesliga debut, he has to face off against Lewandowski, Serge Gnabry, Leroy Sané, Müller. That's not easy.
Yeah.
And he did a fairly good job. He made some good saves. His distribution was good. It's a shame to see that scoreline get attached to a team that, quite frankly, didn't deserve to lose 5-2. If they got a point, I don't think anybody would have complained. It was like fully deserved. They came out, they attacked. They wanted to play good football, and for the most part, I think they did a good job of doing that.
Yeah, we've mentioned the chance to make it 3-0 that Neuer got his hand to, and then even Robin Quaison hit like a thunderbolt that bounced off the underside of the bar. So yeah, they could easily have had 4 goals. Quaison takes me back to Football Manager. I used to sign him when he played for Palermo, and he would always do a job for me. And even just thinking about Schalke, I guess the silver lining of them being relegated is it's always quite fun to play as that like big club in like the second division. If like a Football Manager or a FIFA, just take them up and bring them back to the glory days. So maybe something for Schalke fans to look forward to as a silver lining. A very, very...
I'm sure they'll be thrilled.
Yeah. Once they're in that situation, they might see it differently. But yeah, hopefully they don't get there. I guess as far as this game for today, we've pretty much picked the bones out of it and looked, I guess, a little further ahead as far as Bayern and the Bundesliga season. So thanks so much, Tim, for helping me along the way and giving me your more expert insight than mine as somebody who does have an eye on the Bundesliga quite closely. So appreciate that. It's a pleasure as always to have you. Hope you've enjoyed yourself. Do you have anything coming up in the world of Bavarian tweets? I guess that's kind of just like in the moment, but otherwise you've got the Bayern pod, you've got It's About Football this time. What's going on in 2021?
Yeah, I want to be like, oh, I've got loads of great new things coming on. I don't have anything. I've got nothing planned. It's just going to be more of the same. Like we're going to be doing the podcast, and that's gonna. So we've been talking today about it. It's gonna be more match analysis and like player reviews and talking about like latest news. I think we're going to eventually branch out into more like nebulous concepts of like discussions about, you know, what like entire episodes based around like one topic maybe, or like obviously we've got, I think we average like quite a few downloads every week, and we've got a good following on Twitter, and we are fairly active on Twitter, all of us. So if anybody has suggestions of things they want to hear, I'm not doing anything, so let me know. I want to be making, I'd like to be making more videos this year. I'm currently writing something about Chelsea, which is really hard to do without being horrendously biased. But I'm trying. But yeah, I'll be here doing something.
Well, we'll be in touch again shortly, because we always enjoy having you on. Until then, thanks again, Tim. As far as our listeners, if you want to kind of stay up to date with what we have going on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as well. That's at United Mates FP. And then YouTube, if you want to put some faces to the voices, that is United Mates Football Podcast on YouTube. Until next time, we said Happy New Year at the end of the last pod, the kind of wrap up of 2020, but it's, I think, not a like faux pas still to say Happy New Year. We're within the first week of it. So Happy New Year again. Hope everyone's having a nice 2021 and hasn't sprained their ankle as badly as I have, or at all, hopefully. But otherwise, until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other too. Goodbye.